Hi, welcome to Hillcrest Sermons, growing together.
Show us your heart's delight.
Good morning, friends. Good morning to those of us joining us online as well. If I haven't met you yet, my name's Christian Lindbeck. I know I say this, but I want you to hear me if you've heard me say this before. I'm the deeply grateful lead pastor of Hillcrest Church, and delighted to be gathered with you again on Father's Day. And we really mean it to all the fathers who are gathered here, both family dads and spiritual dads. We just want to acknowledge again that we see you, we thank you, we are praying for you on this day that acknowledges the good and beautiful things about fatherhood. For the past few weeks, really since Youth Sunday, we've been back in a long series in the book of Luke that we started months and months and months ago. We've been almost to more than a year or half a year in the book of Luke, and we're back into that series this morning. I just want to remind a few of you that Luke, our author, is unique among the gospel writers. Luke's a later Greek believer who carefully researched the factual details of Jesus' life. He came to believe in Jesus by the testimony of others, and he had the time, ability, resources to spend 3 years researching those details on his own. Luke was a well-educated believer. Many believe a physician. It's likely that he was a physician. Then it just shows up in the way he writes. It shows up in the details of the way he shares this story. He's an eloquent writer. He is a careful user of language. He's straightforward. He is, we've said this multiple times in the series, provably historically accurate. We can decide what we do with those historical details, but he is the kind of writer that is leaving us meticulous, careful historical details, and he is equally meticulous about the purpose of his book. He desires to write a gospel letter that will assure his reader and readers, consequently us, about the historical record of Jesus' life and his words, that we might therefore, with intellectual and spiritual integrity, decide to trust him with our lives. This is the purpose of his book. I'm going to do careful research that you might, with spiritual and intellectual integrity, decide to put your trust in Jesus and to follow after his way. I think we'll be underlining this a lot in the future. We follow in Jesus' footsteps. We follow his way. And Luke is keenly interested in establishing this baseline truth about a new people who are being collected in this way following with Jesus, about God's restorative work on earth, bringing his kingdom to bear on earth. And about this new way to live, a new way, walking with Jesus by participating, by enacting, by declaring this work that God is doing through Jesus. We've said a few times, there's a lot. Luke is the largest of the Gospels. There's much that we could say and learn, glean from Luke. Again, he is careful with his words, but he put a lot of them on paper. And so there's a lot that we could say. We've done our best to zero into opportunities, stories about Jesus, or words from his lips that only appear uniquely in the book of Luke. And so most of the time you'll be able to say, we'll pull out, you might get one of these parables and not the other, or a detail that's observed by Luke that isn't observed elsewhere, that we hope both enriches your reading of Luke, but your reading of the other Gospels as well, as these details are highlighted to you. And this morning we're going to be in two interconnected passages, some of what you've heard read already. We're going to be in chapter 16 and in chapter 12. They're linked by an important central theme. Now, I think some of you, when I say this theme, are going to be like, yay, happy Father's Day. Thanks a bunch, Christian. However, what we do is we just preach through the books of the Bible. And guess what? Sometimes that just puts you like talking about stuff that maybe you wouldn't have pre-planned yourself. This is the beauty of the thing. And so we'll work this. They're linked by this central theme. And it goes something like this. We've talked about this way. Given what's true about, remember, he's just like, hey, this is true about, given what's true about Jesus, given what's true about us and life as a result of that, Jesus and Luke are raising a question. Then how are Christians liberated to interact with their possessions and their wealth? Maybe you heard that. This is Jesus kind of pulling at the edge of this right now. If there's a way that this impacts our life, how does this liberate us to live with our possessions and our wealth in a way that we wouldn't without this framework? I really love this idea of liberation, and I chose this carefully because there is a acquisition frame set in the world, and I think Jesus frees us into a way better way with our resources. And I do think this is a good question. Like, how does our reframed understanding of the world shape the way we interact with our wealth? It's a really brass tacky kind of question about living aligned to the way. It's one of those ways, like all kinds of aligned to the way can live in our heart and our head. These are the things that we think about. And that we interact with people. This is like an observable thing about us. It's observable to ourselves. It's observable to others. What do we do with our things, and how is that aligned with our understanding of a life liberated, like totally reframed and rethought about as we participate and walk this way out with Jesus? There is, if what's true about Jesus is true in us and life, there is a resultant good and liberated way for us to handle our money. And I think Jesus is probing at that, and Luke is probing at that as well. Jesus says once something like this. He says, where your treasure is, Matthew 5, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Isn't that an interesting reversal? He does not say, where your heart is, you will put your treasure. He says, where your treasure is, your heart will follow. In other words, what you do with your wealth and your resources will shape you. I think Jesus is saying something like this. What we do with our wealth doesn't just have the power to shape our attention. It has the power to shape our affection. We will begin to love the things where we put our greatest resources. I think that is an interesting, and it raises interesting questions because we think, oh, I want to love these things, but I invest in these things. And Jesus is saying plainly, not only will the use of our resources reveal something to us, it is actually shaping what we love. Thought about it that way? It's been bugging me this week. Lord, I want to love these things. I feel the Lord saying to me, then put your time, money, resources, prayer, and effort towards them, and your affection for them will grow. Where your treasure is. Jesus says that another way, in another place this time. He's pokey with his words, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, master your money or it will master you. It's because what wealth offers in goods, which is real, we need goods. What wealth offers in goods and power and allure and both false and real security are powerfully seductive. We want to feel safe. We want to buy things. We need things like, there are things that we need, and money provides these things. I don't think it's worth saying, right? We're not going to get into this like money bad. I'm just saying money is powerful, and all powerful things need boundaries. Look, fire. We all agree fire, good, powerful. I think we'd all also agree best when it has some boundaries. right? It's good in your fireplace, not good all over your house. Powerful things need boundaries. So, funny story. What did Bennett say? Tim and Christian have taught me one thing is tell a funny story. Funny story. So one of the things I love to do around here is for staff, kids' birthdays, I send them a card with $1 for each year of their age in it. So if the kids are on staff here, they get a card from me, and it's sometimes full of dollar bills up to the age of 18, which I think is innocent and cute and fun. I love it. Nobody's getting rich, right? However, when you're 9, it's like, whoa, $9, you know? And maybe you've done this yourself, or maybe when I show you this picture, it rings a bell with you. You ever seen a kid with like their ones fanned out in front of them like they're getting ready to buy a mansion? You know? And I think it's all totally fun and genuinely innocent, but I think it can also be indicative. Because even at this early age, these tender hearts understand the concept of purchasing power. I buy stuff with this. And again, I'm going to continue to do this. I think it's certainly fun, but I just think we have to be cognizant. A friend of mine they have a family story. I'm going to tell their family story, but I love this family story. His brother, when he's very little, like 4 or 5 years old, something like that, gets money like this for his birthday. Like all the family give him money, a few dollar bills kind of thing. And he takes all of his dollar bills and like a little squirrel, he goes to his room with them and he packs them up and lines them up in order and stuff. And then he comes back into the living room where all the family is sitting. And he says to his family, I'm rich. And one of his family members says, rather knowingly, to redirect, says something like, yes, you are rich in love. You're rich in family. And that kid looks right back out of them, deadpan, and says, no, I'm rich because of my money. Right? Like he fans this out. And we now say I'm rich because of my money all the time. Like if I got a dollar bill, I'm like, I'm rich because of my money. Look, this is hilarious when you're 4. It's problematic when you're 40. So Luke asks, and Jesus asks, and I'm asking this morning, how may we practically gain an understanding for life about we love and our resources and be liberated into the good way of Jesus? I bet there's about 1,000 Father's Day messages happening somewhere right now with the intent of reminding family and spiritual dads the people who love you and you love, what they really want from you is your time and not your money. They want your affection and not your money, which I think is true, mostly. Let's just say it's true, but I think some people are like, and also. But let's say it's generally proverbially true that few people look back at the end of their life and says, I wish I had spent less time with my family and made more money. And I think this is what Jesus is poking at. He's poking at that don't get to the end of your life to have this brilliant observation. Have this observation now. I liberate you into a better way of living now. You've heard, we're going to be in 2 parables this morning. You heard all of 16 and 1 verse of 12. We're going to do 16 first and 12 second because I have aligned them not in text order, but in the order of their pointedness. And 12 is real pokey. So we'll handle them that way. So we're going to begin in Luke chapter 16. Some of what you've heard already if you want to make your way there. It's probably titled in your text something like The Rich Man and Lazarus. So we've got our 2 big protagonists in the story right away. Even before I revisit, I want you to notice something. Who gets a name? Lazarus. The rich man just gets rich man. By the way, this is one of the only times Jesus uses a name in a parable. He's making a point The only named one is the one who in all other counts would have been thought of the lesser in society. And his name matters. His name, Lazarus, means the one God helps. So we get this contrast right away between Lazarus and the rich man. I do want to say a second thing before I get into the parable that I want to underscore for you many times, almost every time we teach a parable, and that is this. Remember, parables typically have one central point. So, we are not to derive from this literal systematic theology about how heaven and hell work. In fact, this is a common teaching tool in the era of Jesus, and it frequently uses fantastical details in the story to drive home the central point. So we don't derive from this anything about, oh my gosh, will I be able to see heaven from hell? Will there be this? This is not the point. These are fantastical details to make one central point about a great reversal that happens eventually. So let's jump into the parable. If you've got it in chapter 16, I'm going to pick it up just right there in verse 19. There's kind of an opening prologue, which you heard, right? It says there's this rich man. Now, notice the rich man, one of my favorite ones, he lived in luxury every day. Did you pick that up? There was a rich man dressed in purple, so expensive, and fine linen, expensive, and I love this detail. This is from Jesus. He lived in luxury every day. No Tuesday for rich guy. It's Fridays all week long. Right? Like this guy is living in the lap of luxury. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, longing just to eat what fell from the rich man's table. And even the dogs came and licked his sores. Now, this is full of irony. Jesus is setting up a profoundly ironic, and you're meant to feel the pain of this story. In the story, one man, they're close to each other, he's at his gate. One man lives in ostentatious luxury, right? Abundant luxury. The other man, Lazarus, is in desperate condition. In fact, you're supposed to notice that Lazarus desires what an unclean dog might even get from under the table. Can I just have the scraps that fall off the table? But in fact, not only can he not get that food, Lazarus has become the meal himself. You see, the dogs are lapping up Lazarus. They're lapping up his life. They're eating off of his body. And so it's a truly destitute. I want to slow down because you need to put it in the context. Surely somewhere in your life you have seen a truly broken and destitute human being. This is what Jesus is getting at. This is not an easy picture. It's a hard picture. One of these men is in a painfully broken and destitute circumstance. And one of these people is living in abundance and luxury. Then we get to the center of the parable that picks up in verse 22. It said, "The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried." Now that's a call out. Who knows what happened to the poor man, but the rich man was properly buried. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. That's a shocker. So he called out to him, "Father Abraham, have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." So here Jesus is beginning to get into the unexpected reversal. There was and there is to this day a sense that people who are truly and destitutely poor have made some kind of decisions in their life that have landed them justifiably in this position. If you have never felt that little bias in your heart, take a moment to probe that. Bennett talked about that a few weeks ago. We can often see the truly destitute and think, I wonder how you ended up here. And certainly there was a perspective that wealth showed the blessing of God and being poor showed dishonor. And this guy was in a truly dishonored position. So what a surprise when in fact he is highly honored. He doesn't just die and translated into peace. He's taken to Abraham's side. Literally, Abraham becomes his advocate. So in the Jewish world, this is like saying top boss. Like who? Like Abraham is advocating for Lazarus. This is the most unexpected turn of events. It's not only is he not dishonored, it turns out he was virtuous, honored, and seen by God. Can you let that bias unpack for your second in your own heart? What if you saw somebody on our own streets truly destitute and broken? Could you have in your heart, maybe this is a truly virtuous and decent human being who will be honored by God? This is the very paradox that Jesus is pulling at in this parable. So you have this great reversal, right? And we read of the rich man. He's died and he goes straight to Hades. Now, again, Hades is not hell. Also, we're not learning anything theologically about Hades or hell anyway. Right? This is not the point of this story. The reversal is the point of the story. So in verse 25 through 26, we get the parable explained. Why is the question should be, why has there been this great reversal? And Abraham, through Jesus, teaches the answer. Let's pick it up in verses 25 and 26. But Abraham replied, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us there's a great chasm, separation, that has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us." Why has this happened? Right? Because you lived in abundant luxury and you failed to care for the vulnerable. And I want to simplify, I think, a point that Jesus is making through the words of Abraham. Because what kind of people is Jesus talking to right now? Ones who have passed or ones who are alive? Alive ones. Yeah. So his point is to them. And so he may be making a point, something like this. The living should heed this admonishment about greed and compassion, which I know we have that slide. That's not it either. Yeah. There it is. Yes. The living should heed this admonishment about greed and compassion now. The living. Because Jesus' way is the kingdom way, is different about wealth and about poverty and about honor, about where real dignity lies. You're supposed to pick this up. It's interesting because here's the irony. In the story, there is no one to tell the living this news that he is currently telling the living. Right? In the story, it's like if only the living could know this news right now. I'm telling the living, this is the gift of a parable, that you might know something now and not have to know it later. So that irony is built right into the parable. It's heeding, dear living, hear this story. Isn't it ironic that in the story, it's the living who can't find out? Right? That's the hope is the living would find out. In fact, let's pick that up. Let me move down to verses 27 through 30. Lazarus says, he answered them, "Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my family. For I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them so that they will not come to this place of torment." But Abraham answers him, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. Let them just read and know that this is what's true. No, Father Abraham, he said, if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. Then the living will understand. It's here that Jesus drops a larger additional irony. In the story, these are hypothetical people, right? In the story, the rich man believes that the miracle of a dead man coming to life to tell living people the truth would be enough for all living people to abide by what is true. Right? Let's pick him up in verse 31. Jesus says to them, I just love, sometime later do you think people are like, oh, I see what you did there. Yeah. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. And friends, it's a parable. Parables are not meant to be complicated. The point is supposed to be easy for you to pick up. What is the point? Try it out. What's the point? Anybody? Have compassion on the poor. Thank you. Anybody else? Use your wealth. Have compassion on the poor. Call Lighthouse and see if they'll help. Hey, I'm going to tell you right now, people call us all the time and say, I ran into somebody on the street. I think they could use help. Can the church do something? We can participate in helping, yeah. What's another? One more? Be generous. This side of the room is winning. I don't know if you guys feel like this is a competition or anything. Thank you. Give yourself away. Be compassionate towards the poor. Use your own resources. In this way, you'll be walking like Jesus in a liberated kingdom way, not clinging to your stuff, not thinking that life is about the acquisition of things, not in unnecessary abundance, but enjoying the good things that God has given you in your life and feeling free to be wildly generous with them. To see the vulnerable as people also loved and with dignity before God. And to live a life that displays this kingdom truth in a brass tacky kind of way you might notice about yourself. And others might notice about the kingdom of Jesus. This is the point. I think, often we like to talk. I know every week there are people in here who are not Jesus followers, maybe even skeptics and with other people, or maybe just kind of checking this out, thinking about it. I'm always curious. I want you to think about when you're writing answers to this question, it's like, how does this hit you? This is kind of based on a great reversal afterlife, but it's proverbial. Are there things about Jesus' words that you find noble, good, and worthwhile? Maybe ask yourself about that. Why do I find that noble, good, and worthwhile? What is it about caring for the vulnerable with my own resources that is inherently good? Where does that desire for this goodness come from? And how might Jesus' way be revealing something about the good Creator and how He made us? I think those are good. Luke would love that if you started asking yourself that question. What do I find compelling about this? Or what do I have questions about this? Let's look at Luke 12 now. Again, this one's pointier. This is the only time in Scripture Jesus calls somebody a fool. So that should be like, oh, he's getting serious in here, right? So this is, who is the fool in this parable? Let me say right away, even before I get to it. The fool is the one who thinks life may be about acquiring and saving stuff. Jesus saying, what a foolish way to look at life. What a short-term way. The fool thinks life is about acquiring things and storing them up. That's strong language from Jesus. Again, he has a build-up beginning in verses 13 through 14. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to split his inheritance with me." I'm guessing this is the one who was getting less. "Hey, Jesus, make sure I get my stuff." He did not know Jesus when he asked that question. And Jesus responds, "Hey, who appointed me to the judge and arbiter between you?" But he doesn't stop there. This poor guy was set up. Then he said to them, now listen, verse 15, sometimes Jesus teaches a parable in hopes that you'll glean the point out of it. Sometimes he'll just say the point right up front. This goes back to Youth Sunday again. Sometimes the point is right up front, and then he unpacks it. So this time, you don't have to guess at what he's saying because he says it in verse 15, which you heard read already. Here's Jesus says, listen, watch out. Hey, this message is to you, the living, me and you. Hey, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. There's something greater, bigger, grander, more lovely, more fantastic, more enduring than an abundance of things. He says, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story that drives home this point. So then he picks it up, and we'll go into the next bit in 16 through 21. It says, then he told him this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Hooray, that's great. That is great. And he thought to himself, I should share this rich abundance and make sure that people in my community have plenty to eat. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't say that. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I should store all this extra junk that I don't need. Okay, can I pause? How many storage places do we need in Bellingham? Are there that many college students? Every time I think they're building a new apartment building or something cool that I might use, it's a storage place. Right? And I know there are some college students. I just know that there are also some people like, hey, I have all this junk. I don't want to get rid of it. I know what I'll do. I'll store it. Soapbox, not in my notes. 16 to 20, seriously, another storage. I can't believe it. Verse 18, then he said, now I have this guilt like somebody in here builds these storage places. They're going to come talk to me and be like, these are really necessary, Christian. And I'm sorry. I'm totally sorry. If you're online, I'm sure they are. I'm going on vacation today, so yeah. Then he said, this is what I do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And there I will store a surplus of my grain. Listen to this. And I'll say to myself, remember Jesus is teaching this story. I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Don't take that bait. I'm going to finish it. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. I want you to, if you underline in your Bible, underline that. Because I am convinced that Jesus is God incarnate. God incarnate just said to a group of living people, which includes you and me, watch out. This is how it will be for everybody who lives their life in this framework. Do not live life as though it were about the acquisition and saving of things. The God of the universe just used plain words to speak to you and I. This is how it will be for those who live this way. Here today, gone tomorrow, inconsequential, ephemeral, vaporous. In the book of Ecclesiastes, the writer is searching out what is it under the sun that brings joy and meaning and purpose. And what he does is kind of try everything out and find, well, nope, it ain't that. Nope, it ain't that. Nope, it ain't that. I tried doing that. And he says, sometimes it's translated, these things are meaningless. I'm going to argue with many scholars smarter than myself and say, I think vaporous is actually a better translation. It's not that they don't have meaning, it's just that they don't hold weight. They're vapor. It's all vapor. It's vaporous. It's ephemeral. These things can't hold weight. Well, he tries out money, and he has this to say about that in Ecclesiastes 5, beginning in verse 8. See if this sounds familiar. He says, if you see the poor oppressed in a district, and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things. For one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them are others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields. And I'll paraphrase, nobody is doing what is right with their things. He says, whoever loves money just never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is vaporous. It's meaningless. All goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I've seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there's nothing left for them to inherit. Look, everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil, and they can carry nothing in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what do they gain, since they toil for the wind? All their days they eat in darkness with great frustration, affliction, and anger, because for them, life was about the acquisition of things and the abundance of provision and the saving of the things they have. And this held in concert with Jesus' teaching. Jesus comes along and says, friends, I give you freedom from this. I give you the gift of seeing your resources as a blessing and a benefit. I give you the gift of open-handed, wild, radical generosity with your resources. Who would possibly be this generous? Only those who understand what is actually true about life. This is a call to joy and liberation and freedom from that kind of mindset. And for me, this is Jesus' gift. It's a loving admonishment and a good invitation now to the living. To ask ourselves, what are we preparing for ourselves? What's the world about? What are we sowing into the world? What would life look like with a wildly generous hand? What does a life of radical generosity towards others look like? Could that be joyful? What lasts about it and what doesn't? Now, I want to say, before you feel picked on this, Happy Father's Day. Before you feel picked on, I think the greatest worry in church is this is where he's going to switch into a ploy to give all the money here. Oh, you should be generous with us. I free you from that. That is not happening today. You can let that fear totally evaporate. That's not what this is all about. I think what Jesus is doing here is not to create shame at all. All of these parables are meant to prick the normative conscience of a human being. They use strong words and fantastical details because he knows you and he wants us to go, oof, that hit right there. That hit here. I don't carry a wallet, but my imaginary wallet. That hits Jesus. That hits. I feel that. And it's just meant to create this normative response for us to look at what life is about for us. Not a panicked response, not a fear response, not a shame response. Look, we live in Fairhaven. Even if you're loaded, hear the good news. There's no shame. It's just Jesus' invitation to see things differently. Jesus' invitation to say, what is it really? Look, this is I'm not saying Jesus is saying to you, like the rich young man, go give everything away. I think he's just saying something like, be prepared to live your life with an open hand. How does this welcome and good kingdom principle find its way into every human heart? I'm going to invite our worship team back up. And as they are making their way, I just want to try on 3 questions for you. And you can write these down. They're on our website. They'll probably be in small groups. But just try 3 questions on for yourself this week. They're a little pokey too, but I'm just teaching the Bible. I think one good question is, what do you love? What do you love? What do you love in this world? That has a nice follow-up question that goes something like, how do you know this about yourself? How would others know this about you? Am I grimacing? What do your resources say about what you love? What do you love? How did you know this about yourself? How would others know? What do your resources say? And then if that has created any little poke of conviction at all, I think a fun question, I have to ask myself these questions all the time, and I've been doing it this week. Hey, Jesus' invitation is a good one. He's for us. He likes us. What one little thing might I do in the next week? In the next month? This year? What one little thing could I do in regard to my resources and my limited wealth to align those to my great hope to live aligned to this freedom that Jesus has invited us into? Because here's what I want you to hear, friends. I think that every good parent, and every good father, Father's Day, wants good things for his kids. And I think that's what this is. I think the good father is saying to us, I liberate you from this life of possession of things. I love you. And so I'm showing you and teaching you and modeling to you a life of freedom and joy and connection to your resources. I mean, this is just good parenting. I want you to hear it that way, not as correction, but as good parenting. All you family and spiritual dads, this is good parenting. This is part of the invitation. He says, not just for you, but model it to those you have influence over. As you raise kids in all kinds of ways, model this perspective of life for them because you want good things for them too. And this is a good perspective, a way better way with our resources. So I think this is actually good news for a happy Father's Day. There are good ways to live aligned with Jesus, even when it comes to our things. And I give us this prayer. May the way of the good Father, who is good, he is a good Father, continue to find itself into our ways as we are good parents, modeled after him. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for listening. For more info, visit hcbellingham.com and join us any Sunday, 9 and 11 a.m.